as someone, you've never been a leader before, you don't even know how to be a leader. So you're like figuring it out. And usually you figure it out through experiences, learning lessons, through mistakes and issues you go through.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Gym Break Podcast. This is our new format for the podcast where we bring on leadership within the gym space and talk a little bit about what they see within the trends of the industry and how they're kind of going about helping gyms grow or growing their own gym. And so I like to welcome Ashley Shepard to the podcast. Ashley, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Hey everyone, I am a CPA for the fitness space. Been doing this for about 6 years now. Prior to that, I was working at a firm and went through my own personal fitness journey and thought, I'm going to become a personal trainer. And realized I suck at science and I should just stick with what I know. So I decided to start my own accounting and tax firm and focus on the industry that I was obsessed with, the fitness space. So now I work with gyms, online coaches, all sorts of health and fitness entrepreneurs all over the US, and it's super enjoyable. So
Beautiful. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story. Like, what made you take your fitness journey and what made you start to go out on your own towards helping those gyms?
yeah, the fitness journey really stemmed from seeing my father have so many health problems based on heart health, and was very scary to see someone you love, kind of going through heart attacks and stuff like that. It was very traumatic, especially as a child. So that really motivated me to prioritize my health, start taking care of myself, do all the right things, and fell in love with it. I was super obsessed with, weightlifting and all of that. So that was really what's catapulted me there. And honestly, the personal fitness really is what I think led me to even think that I could work for myself. I had never thought, have my own company one day. I thought, yeah, that would be cool, but I doubt that that's me. And then I had this fire in my stomach. I'm like, I can totally do this. Working at a firm, they're paying me a third or a sixth of what they're billing. I'm like, I could work half as much and make 4 times as much. It's just the math, right? And so, seeing all these successful business owners come in and get help with their tax and accounting, I'm like, I just was very motivated by them and the fitness journey that I went on. So I just decided to start doing that.
Now, that feeling you got, because it's something that really pushed me as well, and what I talk about a lot in my story, because I did something very similar myself as I went down my personal journey. But sometimes that gets lost as we grow because we start to get really ingrained into the business and the growth of the business. And we tend to realize that, hey, some of the things that we were doing back then. And so the feelings you were getting, that motivation, do you still utilize that on a daily basis? And do you see any sort of correlation between I'm not going to say physical health, but the mental side of your personal development within the athletic side that has helped you and be some sort of KPI for you as you continue to evolve your business?
Yeah, I think that initial first feeling I had was kind of like an awakening, you can do all these other things. And it was kind of oh my God, I felt like I have to do this. I can't explain it. I literally felt like my stomach was on fire. It was so weird. And so I'm like, I feel like I have to do this. And I started doing it. And to this day, I think that I'm very motivated by all the things I want to accomplish and all the people I want to help and all of that. I think that that's been hard for me because I've been so disciplined since I went to grad school. Basically, I've been very disciplined and okay with missing out on fun or whatever. I've always been a very disciplined person. I'm like, I'm doing this for the thing I'm trying to accomplish or the future that I know I want, and I'm willing to sacrifice now or do these hard things now for what's to come. Because I know if I do the things, it's gonna come. It's just a matter of when. So I think that I'm naturally pretty motivated because of my discipline.
Yeah, I think that the fitness side, and something that I tended to notice within myself, is it's very easy to be disciplined, but of course, as you continue to grow and evolve, some of that discipline can be utilized incorrectly within the things that you feel comfortable with, but are the things that you no longer should be working on. And as you said at the beginning, you were like, oh, that athletic side has helped that fire I felt inside of me. And that's the whole reason the podcast is named Gym Break, right? Because for me personally, personally, when I go to the gym and I'm doing my workouts, it's like a break from the work, but it also gives me time for that mental clarity and that mental vision to, the grit to kind of build in and be like, oh, all right, like, have that break to be creative and think about certain things that I can't do sitting behind a computer, right? So I love that. And I know when we were first going back and forth, you were talking to me about how you were like, my day is dedicated towards this first before I even start work. I'm the exact opposite. I like to do my workout at the end of the day, for relieving stress and to let my mind kind of relax. But I also have 3 kids. And so I have to,
Priorities. Yeah.
Yeah, there's different priorities. But into the topic for today, diving into the topic, I really wanted to dive into, you work with a lot of gym owners of different sizes. And one thing that I have started to see is I've started to grow, and this happens for every business, is, there's certain stages, not just from a mental situation, but from the things that people should be doing. And so you being a tax professional and working with a lot of gyms, I'd love to hear, of course, not diving into one client in particular because you can't, but just some trends that you see within certain leadership that you work with and the things that certain gym owners are doing to get over certain hurdles, and how you see that within the history and the guidance of the financials that you work with.
Yeah, I think the people that I work with, it is a variety. I would say that there's usually like stages, and sometimes people, we work together and we start at stage 1, or they're like at stage 3, right? So like someone, like I have some clients who have like a garage gym and they train clients in their garage, right? And then the next stage is like, hey, sick of training people in my garage, I'm ready to get my own space. And then they're leasing a space, they're finally in their space. And then usually it's, hey, we're going to actually get a bigger space now because we have to expand and we're like ramped in the small gym. Or, hey, we want to do a second location. And then from there, it's either just bigger or more. That's what I see. I don't work with a lot of like large, like big gyms.
Like so big mocks. Yeah.
It's, I would say, mostly like small business. So I think that in the beginning, so maybe you don't have a garage gym, maybe you're like renting space at another gym. So you don't necessarily have your own location specifically. You have a lot less overhead, right? You're not paying like this large rent, all of the utilities and things to manage the gym. So I think like for this particular conversation, we're probably looking at the next 2 places where you have your own gym, whether it's small or bigger, more space, right? I think like that's probably like where we're talking today.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for those people, when you're just getting into your own gym, maybe you're newer, it's your first gym, it is kind of an adjustment because you're not used to paying the rent. And then maybe you're trying to bring on a team because now you're bringing in more people and your time is like limited. You don't have as much time to divvy up between all this stuff. It's just another added level of like responsibility, basically. So I think number one, I do think that it does take some time for people to adjust and like get used to, okay, like cash flow wise, like I got to pay this rent and I have the utilities, and just making sure like if we're making decisions in this business, like do you bring on a coach or an admin or whatever, really making data-based decisions. So I like to try to keep the rent 30% or less of like the total picture. So there's kind of like a flat percentage. Some people will have 35%. I think that's okay if your other overhead is low, but I think if you go over 30 and you're trying to bring in team members, like free up your time, it's just going to be kind of a cash flow issue. So I think that's like kind of the baseline, 30% or less spent on the actual physical location. As you bring in more space or other locations, I think that the same rule can apply. Like the 30%, I think is like a fair amount. I don't know what your experience is with rent in gyms, but because as you do expand, you have more space, you are going to need more people to coaches to take on, or maybe you have people now renting space from you, which is what I see a lot as well. So I think the trends just kind of depend on the type of gym you're trying to build. Something that I've seen a lot the past year and a half is, hey, I have this gym, but I'm also going to add in online coaching. So people work with people from all over the United States or even internationally that are going to just pay me for remote training, whether it's nutrition, workouts, accountability, whatever. They're kind of like adding that in as, hey, I'm still in my gym, I'm still training my clients one-on-one or group training, but I'm also doing this other thing just to supplement their income. It requires less time and they can still help people. So that's kind of like one of the biggest changes I've seen after COVID, obviously, is that online piece being added in, kind of like built into what they're offering right now. I don't know what your experience with that is, if you're seeing that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, because we do mostly the marketing and branding side over here, I see, I don't know too much about the allocation of rent, but what I will say is I agree with you with that number. I'm very big on leveraging the very common number of, hey, 10% of your budget should go to branding and marketing, right? And if you are looking to bring on more services, and this is just with most businesses, the online component's a completely different model. Most online businesses, e-com brands, online coaching, they have your market chain. You're no longer focusing on a 5 to 10 mile radius. You're focusing on the whole world. And so getting that grasp of understanding that, hey, like usually online businesses spend about 20% on marketing. And are you in a right space with where you're at to, one, bring on a new service and allow yourself to expand your marketing budget, but two, are you at the right place where you can take time away from that first hurdle you talked about? Moving from delegator to leadership type role is, I think, very crucial within that stage 3 mentality. And so I think a trend that I really see right now is people renting locations or trying to expand too soon. I see a lot of gyms trying to move from the garage or open their second location. I had a prospect come in about 2 months ago that fit most of the mold of our target audience as a gym owner, but they were like, oh, we make $300 a year and we have 2 locations. And I'm like, no wonder you have no money.
Yeah, I see that too. Yeah, I think people they get excited, and instead of really like spending more energy, like really building this one and getting it to like the max output, they do get excited and they want to open up the second because it's going okay, and then they're like, oh, open up the second location. But I do agree with you. I think that let's maximize the first one and then add in the second one. Once that you have it up and running, you're not having to manage it. You got people running it. The client roster, it's full, it's bringing in as much revenue as possible. Then I would say time for a second one when you can actually dedicate time to it. One other thing I see, which I think you'll appreciate, is very consistently, people are not spending 10% on marketing. I think that you do need to do marketing. Obviously, I think some people maybe are doing organic marketing instead, but a lot of times I see people spending 1%, 0.5% on marketing. I'm like, let's do some marketing, even if it is free. But paid marketing can be very helpful. And because sometimes people are afraid to spend on marketing because they think, oh, I'm just going to pay for these ads or whatever, and it's not going to work. But like the reality behind marketing is it should pay you to do it ultimately.
Well, I think the goal, back to what you were saying with opening a gym, and if you have one location and you're trying to fill capacity, right? I think there's a misalignment when they're like trying to grow too fast on vision. They get misaligned on vision and they may still be in delegation mode instead of leadership type role. And so you do see a lot of miscommunication within the hirings and the operations. And then when you expand, it gets even worse. I think one of the trends that I see that's kind of needed in the gym space right now, especially after 2020, is really turning that gym more into an experience. Like trying to really hone in on your target, and the target doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be like very niche for a gym, because you still have a membership, but it's a still smaller number of reoccurring that you're getting compared to, larger B2B type companies, but, really focusing on your retention more so. How do you hire your churn rate? Like, how do you move from a 10% churn rate down to a 5%? How do you really keep people engaged longer? How do you build a community and reach that vision? And bringing an online component to that is probably aligned with the business more so, hey, we're at capacity. How do we bring in more members to this gym without raising capacity and utilizing the online space from that perspective? Like, hey, maybe they have their classes being more so like, hey, we can do this in-house. And then for the people that can't make it, we live stream it online. So it allows you to fill capacity a little bit more with these group classes, even further than what the group classes originally are meant to do, and allows you to get and really focus on that operation side before you kind of take that leap into a second or a third location.
Yeah, I agree with you on the churn, because if we didn't have no churn, we would have to get in clients. If we got all the clients we wanted, we'd never lost any, which I know is not realistic, but in the dream world, we didn't lose any. We wouldn't have to be as worried about have to get more sales. I think that can go for any businesses. How do we make the experience better where they don't want to stop coming? They want to actually keep coming back. They don't want to leave. The gym membership isn't the first thing that they cut when they're like reviewing their own personal budget, right? So I do think that is very, very important for all businesses, really, is caring about the customer, their experience, what they're having. I think that's like probably the most important thing.
And then funny enough, that's kind of marketing. Churn rate and retention does play its role. And back to what you were saying, like people are afraid to spend, 5%. And when I went on my rant about experiences, the branding side, I think they have to kind of take that a little bit more seriously. Look at a lot of the retail stores these days now. You have like Shields and you have these, and those are big and they get huge investments for those locations. But for a gym, being able to be like, hey, just think about like, why would someone want to come to my gym? What is the purpose? And use the online space as more of a, don't be afraid of it. Utilize it as more of a, oh, how do I keep people here longer by utilizing these online classes or these other forms of marketing? I'm very big into using digital marketing, for instance, is more of a community enhancer and builder than I am a transactional type situation. I think they go hand in hand, and I think that you can build pretty good reoccurring income and membership, lower churn rate just by leveraging your digital marketing from more of a value-based method than you using it as a, hey, let's just throw Facebook ads up and throw $10,000 at it, But I will say I've almost quit multiple times because like I'm very big into the numbers like you, and you said most gyms aren't even using that 1%. And for marketing, our prices are about half of the 10%. So I like purposely went under to try to help bring more value. And I still have a hard time with people because they look at marketing, they get fearful. And I think it's pretty common for every industry that marketing moves the needle and builds growth for not just, I think that it comes back to the mindset, like you were saying, like they just got this huge expense for a location. They're starting to allocate 30%. They have to build out their team. And so when I have prospects come in and they're like, I just can't spend 10% on marketing. I'm like, well, then marketing is not your problem right now. Operations is your problem. You need to focus on fixing your operations so they're usually at that point in the cycle, in the stage.
I think that marketing, I kind of align with what you're saying, how marketing should also kind of provide value to your existing client base. And I think a lot of times, we're trying to get new clients, we're prospecting, and the way we treat prospects is sometimes different than how we treat the client after they've said, yeah, you know what, I want to work with you. And then now they're in your gym, and now we're like not giving them as much. We're not like pursuing them.
Yeah.
They're like, oh,
Yeah, it's
you wipe them up and then
light them up, and then you're just like, all right, like throw them in the newsletter or the CRM, and then they, and I see that another kind of faulty situation. Like, I mean, you and I have talked before a little bit and about like building the organic and the online stuff. I mean, I do it constantly, but organic stuff doesn't 100% move the needle. It's like the total opposite of paid marketing, right? You need to set certain money aside. And at first you are going to have wasted money unless you focus on sustainability. I think that the problem I see is that gyms get stuck in validation mode. And what I mean by that is they reach a certain number, they open a location, they think the same marketing tactics that got them to where they were are going to move the needle next. And it's like, well, doing cold calls calling to everyone in your area is probably a waste of money at this point. You no longer need to bring in people that are going to only be here too much. You may not even have to do challenges anymore. Nothing wrong with challenges. I think that if done right, challenges are great to move the needle. I've seen very little close rate to challenges compared to just building a sustainable marketing effort towards, how do you make your existing clients better? How do you utilize the review system, utilize your existing audience as your advocates? And that is usually what ends up moving the needle. And gyms have it, I would say, and I don't know where your price points are at, but I know mine are a bit higher. And so it works. I tell gym owners all the time that you're in the sweet spot, man. You're in the sweet spot of like what you charge a month, even if you're a premium gym at $200 a month, because it's very easy for you to build advocacy off of that number multiple times. One member that's there for a year could possibly help bring in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members. Unlike, a large B2B type business like myself, who's like, you ask for a referral once and that's kind of it.
Right.
Anthology. To get back on track, you said about 30% you see towards location. Do you see any sort of other trends in the industry within budget? Maybe some things that you see gyms doing wrong that they could probably shift their mindset towards when you're looking through certain financials for the gyms?
I think that in terms of budget allocation, I think that people do tend to they either don't hire anybody or they hire a lot of different people and they're spending 50% plus on workers, right, on their team, whether that's coaches. And it's usually comes down to like efficiency. Like, do we have the right people who can manage whatever needs to be done? And usually they'll bring in more people because certain people, they only do a certain thing, or maybe they're limited on their hours or something. So I do often see payroll as like one of the biggest expenses, and it's usually like way too high for like where they're at. That's kind of a problem, is we have to look at, okay, you're spending this amount each month of your income on your staff, which we need employees, of course, to help us grow. But are they in the right seats? Are they efficient in doing their role? And like, are we getting the most? Basically, are we being the most efficient we can with the labor costs that we have? And sometimes it's just they have too many people. So I see that a lot. Again, the marketing thing. Outside of that, I tend to see people are either very frugal and they're like minimal expenses and they don't want to spend any money, or they're like buying everything, all the software, all the professional development, courses, books, coaches, all these different things. So they're just trying to figure out what works. So they're just like spending everything, trying to figure it out. So I see kind of both of those. It just really comes down to like the person as an individual.
Yeah. I've seen something very similar, and this is just not even a trend for gym owners. I think it's most business owners. I mean, I was a very frugal. A lot of that had to do with my trauma growing up and what I saw with my family and how they spent money. I was the exact opposite. So I saved completely. And then I got to the point where I'm like, all right, I need something to work here. And I lost some confidence in myself that led me to do the exact opposite. I started just taking so many risks because I'm like, something has to work, that it ended up having both sides of what you said. And so funny enough, it usually comes back to a person's ability to understand their role, the evolution of their role in the company. I think we naturally move to a delegator type role when we start hiring. I think we forget that we need to turn more into a leadership type role. Delegation is, of course, part of that transition, but there's a part there where you have to kind of become more of a leader. And I think part of that marketing side is understanding values of what like you want, like what your vision is, and start hiring people around that to allow them to see the vision. Because I think that that's part of the problem, is they hire a lot of people because of that delegation, right? They're like, oh, I just don't want to do anything anymore. I just want to sit behind my desk and put everything off. It's like, but realistically, as business owners, we're always going to be in it, at least somewhat. I hate it when business developers come to me and just be like, you just need to delegate. I'm like, dude, I'm not going to be completely finished delegating until I'm like at 2, 3, 4, 5 million. It's not as easy as just hiring 8 people.
I was going to add on to what you're saying. People are, you're hiring your first few team members or your first one, and you're more of a delegator, you're not a leader. I think that as someone, you've never been a leader before, you don't even know how to a leader. So you're like figuring it out. And usually you figure it out through, going through experiences, learning lessons through mistakes and issues you go through. And that's how you figure out, oh, okay, like you're figuring out how to be a leader through like trial and error, basically. Unless someone's there coaching you, this is how you be a leader, this is how you act, this is whatever. It's not just something we just know innately. Like we have to learn it, whether through education or experience. So I think that a lot of people we don't know how to be a leader until we learn, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a time consuming thing to get there.
Well, and I think it's very time consuming. And I think that so many things online talk about how to make it to 100,000, which is usually probably someone who's still operating a gym out of their garage, finally get that location around, I would say between 250 and 500K, usually when it's a good number to get that first location. And no one talks about that area between 100,000 to a million. Everyone just assumes right away, oh, I'm going to make it to 100. And then it's just 10 times easier to make it to a million. But I think that 100,000 to a million is by far the hardest spot. And funny enough, I see that leadership trait evolve in many different ways. And something that I had to learn myself when it was talking to, prospects was they're just not a right fit because they don't have that leadership mentality, like just certain attributes that they have of like ghosting or wanting to go cheap on certain things. And it's like, okay, like I understand cost. I understand that. But like you apparently don't have confidence in the way that you're trying to grow this, that you feel like you're ready to put money towards the next part. Even things like branding, building culture, understanding that it's not just a logo that you throw up, but it's something that is going to bring in the right culture. It's going to bring in the right team. It's going to bring in the right members. And so back to what you were saying with the bringing in the right employees, there is going to be a time there when you're making under, I'd say around the 500 to, it could be even up to a million, but you're not going to be able to bring the best people in that you want for the job. You're not going to be able to hire that general manager that makes $125,000 a year. You're just not. It's just not going to fly. You're going to have to go through your delegation stage and push yourself until you make it to a point where, I think that's simple. I mean, from your perspective, it's pretty common, right? You see a trend of like what we call the valley of death, where it's like you start making a lot and then you have to spend more and then you explode, making even more.
And you gotta take a hit on your profit to get to the next level.
Is there anything from a tax situation, especially getting into this year, that you can, when it either comes to purchasing a location, building your own location, like the kind of model that gyms should go through as they're trying to evolve and either save on expenses or invest wisely into the evolution of their gym?
Like you're saying they might buy a commercial building or
that's a good example. Is it smarter? I mean, because that's what big box gyms do, right? The reason they're only $20 a thing is because most of the money they make is from commercial real estate. So would you think that it's smarter for a gym to, buy a location and then rent it out to another gym? Like, what is your thought process on that evolution? What trends have you seen?
I think it's going to depend on where they're renting the actual building. Like I love when someone buys a commercial building, they're going to run their gym in it, but they also have other people renting space. Like they have other areas in the building that they can rent out and actually make some income from to help cover the commercial loan payment. I love that model. I think if you find a building and you can do it, you can get some renters in there to even enhance the experience, whether it's like smoothie bar, coffee shop, whatever, stuff that can like really kind of relate to what you're doing with your gym. I think like that's like awesome. And that's the ideal situation. I would say that's ideal, but I do have clients buy a building that's just like strictly their gym. And I think like long term, that's a good play if you plan on running the gym for a long time, like you have no plans to move or do something else, like for sure, because commercial buildings value go up every single year. And you're just kind of like holding on to equity as it grows. So I think definitely if you can financially cash flow it, then yes, I would say for sure do that. But it does come down to the situation. Like, so, I have some clients who are probably right around $1 million, and I probably wouldn't suggest them buying a building right now. I have other clients who make more and they could totally buy a building. Maybe they don't even want to. So it really comes down to like the individual situation, like where they live, what their goals and dreams and plans are, what do they actually want to accomplish. Maybe buying the building isn't really going to help them with what they're trying to accomplish. So I think that is just dependent on the person.
Yeah, you brought something up there, which I think is very important because I've gone through it multiple times myself. Is vision, right? And you kind of brought it up at the beginning where you were like, "I'm very determined to make it to this level." Me, for instance, a trend that I've seen a lot of as of late is gym owners getting burnt out at a certain stage of growth, and deciding, "Hey, I don't like all this responsibility. I just want to build a personal brand, and do everything online." Grass isn't always greener, I will say that. But is there anything within that market? I know you said you work with a lot of personal brands as well, that you see that may be a positive and negative towards both scenarios.
Yeah, I think the positive with doing like the online brand and business is you generally are going to have way higher profit margins, for sure. You don't have as much overhead, like you have software. That's pretty much it. Very high profit margins. I would say most of the people, they still have a community aspect. I mean, as long as they're doing it the right way, they are building a community. It's just online. Sometimes they'll have events too where they actually do get to meet the people, and it's more like, hey, I'm your coach. We're not like in a gym, but we are still connecting in different ways. So I think there's still that community aspect, which is great. And then also, I would say that they don't have to be physically doing something like they don't have to be at the gym to they can be literally wherever they want to be running their business, which I think that's if that's the type of life you want to be able to travel, or maybe you have family all over the place, like maybe that might appeal to like how you want to live your life. Some people like the routine. They like where where they're at, their community, and they want to be in person. So maybe like the gym route is better for them. I think it just depends. But I think there is a lot of upside to the online space. I think that maybe the negative is, you don't have that in-person personal element to establish trust as easily. And, a lot of people after COVID, I think, do feel like, hey, I get out there and like meet people and shake their hand and like have that in person, feeling. It's just different. So I think it just kind of depends. That's why I like the hybrid mix of having the gym, having an online component, so they can pick which one do you want to participate in. I love that because you kind of get the best of both worlds, essentially. I would say that there's a lot of upside to the online.
Yeah, I think you nailed something there that I kind of want to talk about, which is the premise of that connection side and building relationships. Because I think my wife's a therapist, and me doing branding, I really feel work on the psychological part of brands and personal brands, and so I've seen, this isn't everyone, of course, but a majority of people that are athletic, I see it with athletes, I see it with gym owners, and you may not know this, but there's the color wheel. My wife's, like I said, she's a therapist, so they go off of these color patterns, and it's something that me as a leader, I've started to develop really easily when I can talk to someone. And most gym owners are that personality. They're very connection oriented. It's part of their ethos. That usually tends to be something that's missing if they go completely online, is that connection, and they wonder why they're miserable. And it's getting back to connecting, right?
I got all the profit, I got all my time, but then maybe they're not happy with it. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I like that model too of doing both. I think that from a con perspective, I think, and this could be a con either way, is like I said earlier, people see grass is green. They say grass is greener, right? They're like, prospect come to me a couple weeks ago that was like, had a beautiful model. They're at about 300 a year, very good profits for what they were doing. And they had kind of a hybrid with they did their gym. Instead of having a location, they did the 2U kind of location with a certain type of business where they would go in and they would help certain situations, and they completely scrapped it. And they're like, I can't trust the trainers that I work with that we're hiring. And so I want to do everything online. And it's one faulty that I see with the online world is people think that because they own a personal brand, it means that they're not going to have employees at all. It's no, you're still going to have to hire people.
Still going to have problems.
Yeah. And I think that the operation side, because it's very analytical and a structure based, is the opposite of I want to connect with people space. It's basically like a salesman versus an operator, right? It's very similar to gym owners. I think that, trying to bring someone in, I think right away to focus on operations, hence why a general manager or someone that can help alleviate some of that structure within the business is probably a good, really first first hire and to keep the trainers to 1099 until they have the ability to change them to W-2. And I wouldn't even do that soon. I would probably wait until you're close to south of $1 million before you make that transition.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the relationship with the workers. Like, do they decide when they want to work, or do you decide when they work? So it really comes down to that control, necessarily.
It is hard. 1099 and freelancers. I mean, in my industry, we have a very similar situation, right? We bring freelancers on.
Yeah.
I don't know about you and what you do, because I know that you guys need to have certain licenses and stuff like that. And so for us anyways, it's a little bit much more of a challenge because the commitment is not there when you have 1099s. And so it could be very similar to gyms, balancing that commitment of their trainers.
Yeah, I mean, we use 1099 and W-2. It just kind of depends on the role. And I surprisingly have found some of my 1099s are more committed than W-2 employees.
It is.
From the past, not current. But
well, I mean, it's part of becoming a leader, right? I mean, a good example for me is we're in a position right now where we're hiring a new role that I haven't. It's basically my assistant. And I've never documented any of that stuff. We document all the work stuff because I've done it all before I hired for it. But I'm like, oh, this guy's gonna have to ghost me. We're gonna have to figure this out. So I need someone that's more outcome driven, not task driven. And I had a call with a few people last week that made it past the first round of interviews. And part of that leadership growth is I got on a call and I'm like, this is a good person. They fit the values that we have in the company. But I don't feel like they're a right fit. And that's what leadership is, right? Being able to learn from those mistakes in the past and be able to be like, well, I don't know if this person's going to be as committed towards this as someone else to bring in the role.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So the hiring, managing your people and your workers, that is the hardest part, in my opinion, of business.
Yeah, it is. People in general, I think that it goes, and I think you mentioned it earlier too, when it came to prospects, right? Existing members. I think there has to be a sync with that, like understanding that, hey, people are people. They're just two different parts of the business. One's giving you the money and one's making sure the money stays. Overall, we're getting close to the end of the podcast. I really do appreciate you being on. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and how you can help them?
Yeah, I am on all social media platforms pretty much. Ashley Shepherd, CPA, all the same. I work with all health and fitness businesses, kind of act as a tax strategist / CFO type role. So we work very closely together and help you get all your financial needs situated and help you save money on taxes. Probably help.
That's beautiful. Do you have a URL or anything that they can go to check you out, to give you a phone call or anything along those natures?
Yeah, you can check out my website. It's moneymuscleco.com, and you'll have the opportunity to book a call with me on the website as well.
All right, beautiful. I love how you're kind of a fractional as well as a CPA. That's really nice. And so, yeah, I do appreciate you jumping on, Ashley, and I look forward to possibly having you on in the near future.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Gym Break. We will see you all later.